Hi, I'm Jen.
And I'm Brittany, and we're the Village Homeschoolers.
And today we're talking about the real fun subject of conflict resolution in a homeschool group.
Oh, conflict resolution.
This is one of those not fun subjects.
It's like money. It's up there with money and politics. You don't want to talk about conflict resolution, I think.
Yeah, but it's unavoidable, like politics.
and money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think the worst part for me.
Yeah.
Is the worst part for you? Running a group? Conflict resolution?
Yeah, of course it is. Especially when it's new people and I don't know them.
Oh, yeah. You need that connection to
Yeah.
heal.
Yeah.
I get that.
Move forward transformatively.
If you wonder what we're talking about, please listen to our podcast with our friend Elizabeth. Yeah, I think it's one of those things I in my Pollyanna side where I'm like, you know what? We're homeschoolers. We're good people, which is not true. Just because you're a homeschooler doesn't mean you're a good person, but we like to assume.
She's speaking for herself, of course.
No, but we're homeschoolers. We have common goals. We respect and appreciate each other.
And there's a lot of hippies, so you just assume everybody's like peace and love and,
Yeah, and organic granola. I think there's a lot of assumptions that this is not necessary. And maybe we don't want it to be necessary. Mm-hmm. But it is.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much. I don't know. But I mean, it happens. We're human beings. Just because we homeschool doesn't mean we don't have conflict with other human beings. In fact, maybe we have more, if you want to think about it, because we're really used to bucking the trends of normal society.
This is true. And there's a lot of people at our co-op, so there's bound to be a little bit of head-butting.
Yeah, I think. And there are a lot of opinions. And that's one thing. Homeschoolers are an opinionated bunch.
That's true.
Love you all.
Yeah. So it's a bag. So sometimes it's between us adults. Sometimes it's between leaders. Sometimes it's with the kids. We're not fighting with kids, but kids fight.
There's conflict.
And it's a touchy subject.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about all the different ways we see conflict happen, how we work to resolve it, and I'm going to put the caveat out there that we're not therapists. We're not even, if you've listened to our previous podcast with Elizabeth, you learned that Jen got a D in philosophy in college. So really, I don't know why you're listening to us at all. No.
I was a science major, so for me, abstract thoughts are hard for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's there's varying levels of approach, different approaches to things with parenting and emotions and all that stuff. And so we're by no means experts, but we are doing the best we can because the community is important to us.
Mm-hmm. And we're just going to give examples of how we've resolved things.
Yes.
Not best for everybody or every situation, but they work for us. And
yes.
They do work for us. And we have a very cohesive group now.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, there's a few little.
Here and there we have moments, but yeah, because we're humans. All right. So let's talk about first. I want to talk about between the adults because we've spent a lot of time actually talking about how the co-op is important for adults.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think that's the more common conflict actually is between adults. And I don't mean fighting. I just mean conflict.
Yeah. And sometimes, I like to sometimes let people work it out, right? So
that's my parenting approach too.
Yeah.
I hear my kids, bickering upstairs. And I'm like, I'm going to wait a little bit.
Well, that's the benefit of having an only child.
Yeah, you don't have that. Well, and with the adults, yeah, it's let them work it out. Because it may not even be about co-op.
Yeah.
Right?
Some people just have a bad day
right.
Some days, and they just come in kind of
cranky.
Yeah. But, then there's issues where we had a issue with one of the moms got yelled at in the parking lot by another mom. And we had no idea it even happened.
Well, so yeah, we found out months later. So what had happened was one of the moms was teaching a book club class, and she brought up a controversial book. And there were 12 kids in the class. Mm-hmm. None of the parents of the 12 children had an issue with them reading this book.
But the co-teacher did.
Well, we can No, it wasn't even the co-teacher.
No, it wasn't.
We'll even say the book. I don't know why The Giver. We were
Yeah.
reading. They were going to read The Giver, and my child was in that class, and I was okay with that. So for the record, and they weren't 4-year-olds. They were old enough to handle that, and they read the book, and they went into the class, and they did the class about the book, and all this other stuff. And one of the moms who was assisting in that class, she wasn't even the co-teacher. She was just an assistant in the class. You know, if kids needed help with anything or all that stuff, sat through the whole thing, went out to the parking lot to leave, and then ran into the teacher who taught the class about The Giver and yelled at her.
Yeah, about the subject. Because if you've never heard the book before, they talk about killing babies.
Yeah, she said it was really controversial that children shouldn't be reading it because, you know, they're playing this utopian society and all this stuff, and therefore they do some things that are not
A little bit of eugenics.
Yeah, a little. Yeah, and in our group, the kids were old enough. It is an important piece of literature. We felt like, you know, this is something that was important to us. So, and they read it and they did fine with it. And the children never knew this happened, but this particular mother did not think it was an appropriate book for children, and had a lot of things going on in her own personal life that may have affected her opinion on this, and then just kind of unleashed it on the other parent in the parking lot after co-op was over. And I'm going to preface this by saying that parent who yelled is no longer in our co-op. I don't even know if she's homeschooling anymore.
Yeah. And now this is not one of those situations where I would have let people, you know, work it out.
Right. No, this isn't they're just, you know, having a bad day situation. Yeah.
And so I felt really bad because the teacher felt like she had to work it out herself. She didn't feel like she could come to us. And I feel pretty awful that she suffered through this.
Right.
Without our help.
Right. Yeah. So this is what you're trying to avoid. Right. And so what we tried to tell people, and we told this person after, was like, hey, next time that happens, you need to come to the leaders. That's why we're here.
Yes.
And we need to be able to sit down and go, okay, what are you upset about? How do you feel when she says that? And then kind of walk people through, like, none of the other parents who had actual children reading the book and discussing the book had an issue with it. You didn't have a child reading the book and discussing the book, and you don't really get to make a decision and a judgment call for other people's kids.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
you know.
it's tough. And so, but like in other cases where, you know, there are people that they just complain, right? There's complainers, and it happens in those cases where I'm like, you know what? You guys can probably just work it out. Or maybe you just want to complain to me and you don't want me to take action. And I think that is also like completely okay. You know, like there's just different conflicts with personalities sometimes that are completely unavoidable.
Right. And so generally what we try to do whether we're dealing with the conflicts in personalities and moods, or where we're dealing with actual conflict and true differing of opinion, like we were in the situation with The Giver, is we try to model good behavior.
Yes.
Easier said than done, because we also have opinions and emotions and bad days. We try to acknowledge really positive things. So how we do this is we actually have a shout out box, and we don't shout out to the kids. We do that differently, but we like encourage people. Like if you see another parent doing something really awesome or something you appreciate,
above and beyond, right?
Yeah, please put a comment in there, and we will publish it on our we have a discussion forum that we run for our website, on our website for our co-op, and it gets published there. And it's like, hey, Susie, you know, sat down and helped me so much with one of my little kids who was really struggling and was, you know, struggling with some impulsive behaviors in class, and we just really appreciated the extra time she took to, you know, do that kind of thing. And so,
you know, or the leader, one of our leaders helped organize the closet or something like
so
that.
We all could find the supplies we needed. Yeah, those kinds of things. We really try to acknowledge, because we do appreciate it. It's not done it's done to be kind and to let them know we really appreciate it and we see what they're doing. And I think that minimizes the personality conflicts and the people who are complaining, because some people are going to complain and nitpick and never be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's people that get upset that they don't get shouted out in the shout out box every week, you know? They were like, why didn't you shout out me? And I was like, oh, I didn't see what you did. So it's like, you know, and it's not just me doing shout outs, though I do a lot of them.
She does it. Jen's the most effusive lover of shout out or ever. Actually, people always think it's me writing them, and it's not.
No, it's Brittany's editing them. So it sounds like her voice because I need to be edited usually.
Well, I like to add some
Exclamation marks.
pizzazz. Yeah. But it's actually Jem. Jem has a lot of them. I mean, other people do too. But yeah. So I think that's really what it is. We need to be able to have people who are comfortable when the conflict is real, when coming to other adults, leaders, and saying, hey, can you kind of mediate this for me? Allowing both parties to be heard, allowing both people to continue to hold their belief system. We never wanted to convince this mother, or we wouldn't have tried to convince this mother that The Giver was an appropriate book for kids. She was allowed to think it wasn't.
Absolutely.
And her kid wasn't in the class, so her kid was not exposed to it.
But it's definitely not okay for her to yell at somebody.
But it's not okay for her to yell at somebody over a differing opinion when the children who were involved were perfectly safe and their parents were perfectly happy with the content at the time.
Absolutely.
So that's when we need to encourage adults to come to other people for mediation, and then we need to, for the rest of it, the conflict of personalities and those kinds of minor squabbles, we need to just kind of sit back, take a deep breath, let it happen, acknowledge people's humanity, and model and shout out to those positive behaviors.
Yeah, and we also have to accept that some people don't want to cooperate. There's going to be people that just don't go along with everybody else, that just...
We focus a lot on the fact that, we may not be the group for everybody.
Yes.
And if we're not, then you can go start your own group. You can go do this yourself. You can go someplace else where it's a better fit for you. And of course, I've talked about that. I take that personally when that happens. It is hard, but really, if you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah. And, we have roles we expect everybody to perform in our co-op because it's cooperative. So there's people that really struggle with some of these roles. Like, they don't want to help clean up afterwards. So we've had people that just basically said, no, I'm not doing it.
Right.
And
we encourage them to find a co-op that hires a janitor.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that sounds crazy, but no, it's not. Then we're not the right group for you.
Exactly.
We built our community around doing all this stuff together.
Yeah, and so there's people that have complained, and we've had to step in because we're like, well, yeah, but that you have to. You have to help, and that's kind of how we function. That's how this group works. This is kind of the camaraderie. It's we're all in this together, and if you don't want to be in this together, then maybe we're not the group for you.
Right, and most of the time, we've actually been asked this a couple times, even by members of our group. They're like, well, what happens if people are just not willing to go along with the basic rules and requirements? We're like, most of the time they quit. We don't even have to, we've never had to tell anybody,
you're not welcome here.
You're not welcome here anymore. Because before it ever gets to that point, they've decided we're not the group for them.
Yeah, it's they understand. They know. And it's not like we make it awkward for them, but we do tell them, you do have to perform this role, and we do expect this from you. And sometimes we have to take it to email, and sometimes we have to be like, well, this was kind of an issue, and I think you need to address it. And then they finish off the semester, and we never see them again.
Right.
It happens.
Right. And I think, that is really the thing. If you can, encourage conflict resolution where it needs to be, where it needs to happen, and then do those, positive role modeling, and then just kind of hold the line to protect the community, you aren't going to have a lot of we're going to need security to escort this woman out. That doesn't happen.
We've only had to do that one time.
We're kidding. Apparently, sometimes our newer people in our co-op, they're like, we listen to your podcast and we wonder who you're talking about with these older stories. And I'm like, we've never had security escort anyone out.
I know. And people are always we're trying to figure out who this is about.
Yeah.
And it's if you think it's about you, it is. I'm just kidding.
It's not.
These are generalizations.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I think that when you have the adult conflict, if people are not really willing to do the resolution part of it, they're probably not a fit for your group. And they know it just as much as you do.
Yeah.
And they're going to go ahead and find something better for them. And you just have to work on not taking it personally, Brittany. I have a little bit of a desire to problem solve for everybody. It's not a great trait sometimes. Okay, so now, believe it or not, I know Jen and I are so congenial with each other, but we actually also sometimes have conflict, along with our third leader.
No, we never have conflict with her. She always is
she is really the most easygoing of the three of us.
I know, and it's sometimes I'm like, no, I want you to tell me that Brittany is wrong. We don't want you to be like, yeah,
Well,
you both have good points. No.
Yeah. It's so funny. Oh, yeah. Well, she can't tell you I'm wrong because I'm not, Jen. Yeah, no. Again, when you're dealing with even a small group of adults, 'cause that's what we are, a tiny group of 3, maybe 4 or 5 in the future, we've had conflict about that. And we have to work it out like big people.
Yeah, but it really helps when you're working with people that you actually get along with.
Right.
It's really hard not to get along with Brittany, honestly.
Well,
so
that's my husband.
Well, I know, same.
Yeah, I think that's true. So actually, we don't have an election. Like, we don't elect our club leaders.
Well, basically, it was like, please, somebody do this or we're going to dissolve.
We ask people if they're willing to do it. And we do that we talked about when we interviewed Brandy in our founder series, the institutional knowledge. So we do that with the understanding of the people doing the asking have done the job. And that's why we kind of, we ask people who
we think would fit in.
We think would fit the task and that we think are okay working with us, because not everyone's going to be okay working with us either.
This is true. We are kind of strong personality.
Somebody told me recently, they're like, they were singing your praises actually, but they're like, oh, when I first met her, I was really scared of her.
I get that a lot, actually. People think
I told her that.
Yeah. People think I'm really mean and I'm really not.
I know. I was like, and so anyway, she understands that now, obviously. But it's like, are you willing to work with us? Because I'm a strong personality. Jen's a strong personality. Our other leader's not as intense, I think, as both of us.
She's more agreeable than we are.
Yeah, she's nicer than us, but but I mean, you have to really get along with us.
Yeah, because if I can't stand Brittany, like, how am I going? I spend so much time with Brittany.
Right.
If I didn't like her, this would be a problem, because you're probably not going to grow to like somebody, right? And if you're already having conflict and you're not even running a co-op together, then it's just going to get
anything together.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just join a co-op and like have a coup, because. Which throwing out all the leadership.
That's never happened to us, but I've heard of other groups that's happened too. Yeah.
I hope nobody's planning a coup in ours.
Yeah. I mean, there's some days where I'd be like, have at it, coup away.
Yeah.
We're all human. We get tired. Yeah. So Jen always she was just saying this to our friend, we like an odd number of leaders because you need a vote breaker.
Yeah. Even though our other leader just tends to agree with both of us.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, there are points where you're never going to agree. And I think we talked about, when you have any conflict with 2 adults, you're going to just be like, I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I hold this different viewpoint.
Absolutely.
And we need to make a decision, because our job is to administrate.
Yes.
And that's why you need a tiebreaker sometime.
Yeah. Like we recently got in a little, we don't fight. I mean, fighting has a connotation of.
Yeah, we actually tell each other we love each other when we're having disagreements.
Yes.
They're like, I love you, but.
Deeply. Yeah. Which is in my notes here.
Yeah, I love you deeply, but.
Yeah, we kind of had a disagreement on where to put lunch bins. Which is such a silly thing.
So funny. I forgot that. I didn't even read that we were in a disagreement about that until we were halfway through the conversation. I was like, oh, Jen's really getting heated.
I don't know why.
It's because you clean them up.
Yeah, well, this is true. I mean, It's not like I was so mad, like I'm not flipping tables or anything, but I'm like,
just close.
I just threw a chair. It's not a big deal. Modeling good behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I mean, there's going to be conflict, but...
Well, to give some background story on this. So what had happened was, in the fall, we had kids and families leaving their bags and purses and lunch boxes hither and yon. I mean, they were just all over the big hall where we would eat lunch and hold our morning meeting and stuff like that. And Jen's job is the facility. So she's in charge of making sure things are put where they're supposed to be and cleaned up and locked up and the alarm code set and all that. And so she was the one cleaning up lunch boxes and finding left lunch boxes when people left them and being like, we have a lost and found section that's growing. And, and so it is what it is. So she wanted, what did you want us to do?
I wanted them to leave it in the car.
Oh, that's right.
Well, because mostly we have a cake decorating class as well, and cakes take up a lot of space.
Right.
Because they're in projects. And our projects. And
so she wanted us to leave the lunch bags and boxes in the car. I was like, we have an issue with children
running in the parking lot.
If you put all of their food and water out there, it's going to be 10 times worse.
Now, I didn't say they had to leave their water out in the car, Brittany, but I wanted lunches out there, and then, I argued
snacks.
that, parents should be going and getting the lunch bins.
Right.
But anyway.
And I went on the pragmatic side, which is we have actually instituted rules, and we are following them better, but we never get 100% compliance. I watched children go in and out of the parking lot without their parents.
She's looking at me with really sassy eyes right now. I'm just letting you know.
With their parents' car keys yesterday.
But they said I'm the adult because my mom left temporarily.
I'm 11. Yeah, you're taking your 2-year-old sibling with you. And I also, it'll be known, have an irrational fear of cars and small children. I really do. So that could have been speaking here. And so I was just like, okay, I get what you're saying, but I don't want them left in the car. And then I think, and this is when I realized it was getting heated, I said to her, I have a 6-year-old. And he's going to be bugging me for his lunch, and I'm going to be doing something else, and it's going to be a whole thing, Jen, and I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay. And so then we ended up settling on, we have a bunch of tables, and we just set up like, these are the lunch tables, and my job is to make sure people follow those rules. I'm the MC of the day, if you will. And I was like, lunch is on the table, lunch is on the table, lunch is on the table.
So there was compromise.
Yeah, there was compromise, and it worked. Mostly happy with it?
Yeah, I'm mostly happy with it.
Okay,
yeah.
Good to know.
It's good. It's good enough. Yeah. I'm not that passionate about lunch. I don't know why lunch always gets brought up as like one of these subjects that I'm like raising my fist to the sky.
Yeah, it's because it involves a lot of cleanup for you.
Yeah,
in your defense. I'm gonna defend you now, even though yeah. So
even though what? Freddie?
Yeah. So I think you have to have that odd number. You have to have a vote breaker, and then you have to have the compromise kind of situation. Now, I think you have to walk a line, and I have no good way to describe this, between voting and surveying your whole group as opposed to your leaders.
Yeah.
Your administrators, if you will. Sometimes you need the whole group's input.
Yeah.
You don't need the whole group's input for everything. Like the lunch tape, like the conversation.
Oh, yeah, that didn't need to be a survey. Oh.
And there is a tendency of some people in our group to want to have input on everything.
Mm-hmm. My husband's one of them.
Yeah, he is. We love you. If you're listening, and I'm sure you are. But it's like, we sometimes have to draw the line and be like, who makes the decision here? Because the more adults you include in the conversation, the more conflict there's going to be.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we have this perfect, but we try. We try to make sure the 3 of us are making those decisions that we don't need everybody else to do. And we keep the conflict, if it exists, between just 3 people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good. And, sometimes we get heated, but we apologize.
Yeah, we tell each other we're deeply in love.
Which we are.
Yeah, apologizing is good. As we learned when we recorded our podcast with our friend Elizabeth, Jen needs an apology.
Yeah, to move forward. Even if you give me an apology, or I give one, which is more me giving them.
But you know what? Now that I know that about you, I'm going to apologize more.
You don't have to. You can just tell me you love me.
I do. Well, I do. Yeah. So I think I think there's value in that, though. I'm so glad we talked about that, because that means there are some people that need to hear, I'm so sorry. They don't need us to solve it. Jen, this is your big thing. I don't want you to solve my problem. I just want you to listen to me and tell you I'm sorry. Tell me you're sorry.
Yeah, but then it gets kind of a little silly, because then we're just telling each other our problems and apologizing for each other's problems. Well, which we did on the phone last night. I'm so sorry.
But you felt better, and I feel better.
This is true.
So, that ritual is important.
I mean, and you also got to remember that sometimes Brittany and I spend so much time together that our feminine times have synced with each other.
Our moon cycles.
We're both in the moon tent together.
The red tent. The red tent. Yeah. We mean that metaphorically, although sometimes I wish it was real. It's which, hormones are a thing.
Yeah. And we kind of get sassy at the same exact time.
Yeah.
Or within hours at each other.
Yeah. Within hours of each other, if you know what we mean.
Yeah.
Our other leader's darn lucky. She's actually been pregnant and breastfeeding little ones longer than we have.
Almost the entire time she's a leader.
Yeah. So otherwise she'd be right there with us, I'm sure. In fact, we have another person that we're talking to about actually being a co-op leader with us, and I warned her of this. I was like, just so you know,
we're all in this together, literally, physically.
Yeah, it'll be a bad 3 to 5 days.
But I also like to realize that these people have the best of intentions,
right?
These leaders are doing all this, they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears, you know what I mean, and love and devotion into this to not just make it great for their own children, but to make it great for my child as well. And it's really hard to stay mad at anybody that cares about your child like you do. And it's hard for me not to get mushy and say I love them a lot. Yeah. But
this
sometimes,
is why all the shout outs are from her.
I know. Or like, there'll be times that we do those like paint and drink things. And I just like get drunk and paint and then write them poetry later.
She does. She's a real hugger. No, but you get a glass of wine into Jen and she's the biggest love fest going.
Oh yeah, I'm really appreciative of what they do. So it's hard for me to ever stay mad at them because they're just so sweet.
Well, they enrich your life, right? Even with the conflict. And I think that's like, we joke about the hormones, but like, we're humans. Everybody has hormones. Mm-hmm. Everybody has bad days. Everybody has stress. And so when you realize their intentions are good, this is just a hard period for them right now, conflict becomes easier to resolve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Give people some grace, right?
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't mean you can be mean to us. I'm just throwing that out there.
We will crumble and cry. So the last conflict, I think, so we've talked a lot about adults because I actually think that's where a lot of this comes because the adults, I think, are more verbal about conflict. But, we have kids.
Yeah.
And they have conflict because they are little humans. Humans all, but very human.
And sometimes the kids' conflict turns into adult conflict too. So it's a messy.
Well, and I am of the keep the adults have to be involved because we need to help our children navigate things, but like keep the adult emotions out of it, right? I think that's the first thing. Like, okay, remember this is about the kids and about a learning experience for our children and making sure our children are successful. My feelings on this, not important here.
Yes. And you got to remember they're kids. Kids are going to fight and they're going to wrestle and they're going to intentionally or unintentionally hurt each other.
Right. And they're navigating, they don't have good words. So they're navigating all sorts of things like preteens navigating stuff. Mm-hmm. They don't always have all the life skills to do it yet.
Exactly.
And so there's going to be hurt feelings. There's going to be things said that they don't mean. I think, Jen, you're so good at being like, this is typical kid stuff. Let's take a big breath. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to decide, is this typical kid stuff or is this...
there's been times where my son had like a wrestling match with another kid and the other kid kind of pushed him and hurt him a little bit. But like for me, it's like, okay, these are kids. They do kid stuff. I went to the mom, just said, just heads up. I'm not upset, but just keep an eye out on it. Mm-hmm.
And it was resolved.
And it was fine. And other parents have gotten more upset seeing me not get upset about it.
Right.
But I think it's like, remember kids do this kind of stuff. This is very typical. If he had a sibling, he'd be wrestling and fighting and punching his, brother all the time.
Right.
I have 4 siblings. I did that kind of stuff all the time.
Right. Exactly. I think, and that's like, we go to the parent and we're like, well, I did this yesterday. It was a situation and I was like, hey, so this happened today in the class. The teacher told me about it. You may want to have a conversation with your child. We're not expecting anything. No one's in trouble. Just so you know, you just may want to have a chat. And the parent was like, absolutely, I'll totally do that.
And the majority of the time that is the case. Mm-hmm. Very, very rarely is there something that has to go past that.
Right.
Every once in a while we get a parent that just is kind of like, they're kids, let them, whatever, or if you're like, your child just punched somebody and they're like, yeah, the kids do that kind of stuff. And you're like, well, I don't know. Do kids do that kind of stuff? Yeah. Maybe to an extent, but, there has to be a time where you go, okay, maybe I have to step in as a parent. And if the parents don't step in, then we have to kind of escalate it a little bit, which we hate doing and we rarely ever have to do it. Mm-hmm. But it has happened. And generally it's just like, a quick email to the parent, like, here, we have
this is our plan.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think when safety is an issue, and again, Jen said so rarely, we have none of this in place at the moment.
Yeah. We haven't had to deal with it in a long time.
Right. It's just like an email. Like normally what we do is we actually, with that child, often our plan is normally to be like, we're going to have an adult with you more often.
Exactly.
To help you navigate the situation. Yes. And we just send out an email and we're like, hey, this is our plan. Are you in agreement with this? Are you okay? Do you want to be that adult? Or do you want it to be an adult who is not?
We're here to help you and support you. We want your child to succeed and be in our group. So this is what we do to kind of make sure that happens.
And and I think it's really important when you're having those conversations with the parents, but this is not a judgment on the child or you. It is just a observation and we want your child to be successful. So we're going to find a way to make that work.
Yeah. And just like remind them, like, kids aren't perfect. We're not expecting your child to be perfect all the time. We're not, not everybody's a model citizen here.
No one is, if you really want to get technical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's okay. And it's, kids have rough periods. Some kids have harder times than others. And, we're here just to navigate this and make this successful for you and for the co-op. And, so everybody's happy and this is resolved and we can move forward with it.
Now, I will say, I think this is important, especially as kids get older. And your hope, if you're forming a homeschool co-op community, is that this community grows outside of whatever day you meet and do classes or field trips. And so you are going to do that, right? That's you have kids on play dates together. You have kids doing sleepovers. You have kids doing all these fun things maybe outside of co-op hours. And even then, sometimes there's conflict, right?
Yes.
Those kids are playing a Minecraft together and there's a conflict. There's this and that and the other. And I think it's important. Sometimes those are brought to co-op things. In fact, frequently they'll come, hey, we thought you should know this because you're the co-op leaders. And I'm like, okay, but it didn't happen at co-op. Didn't happen with a co-op thing. And
so as troubling as that sounds, that's kind of not our...
We encourage you to address that with the other parent involved.
Yeah.
Or guardian involved. And I think you need to draw the line when you're doing conflict resolution as a club leader. I think you need to draw that gentle boundary and say,
I hear you.
These are members of our co-op having conflict, but it's not happening here. And we encourage you to address that with the families involved to the best of your ability, because you can't go out and resolve every conflict in the world.
Yeah, exactly. We're not here for that.
Right. And that's going to happen if you are successful at building that community.
Exactly. And
yeah. So that's the one thing I will give as a caveat. Yeah. So that's what we have to say about conflict and resolving it. It's not a perfect world.
Yeah.
There will be conflict. You will have to work through some resolution. Sometimes you'll just agree to disagree. But you can keep going.
Work it out, man.
Yeah. Don't let it be the death knell of your co-op, for sure. It's not worth it.
You just got to go out there and find your Britney in life.
Oh, gosh. I have conflict. I have a lot of conflict in my own head with people, and I try to talk myself through it and just be like, it's fine. I think we did have a question. We had a question from somebody who, I don't know where they're asking this from, but they asked us why we don't talk about the names of people we're talking about in the name of our co-op.
So why is that, Brittany?
So I think in one way, shape, or form, we want this, on a positive note, we want this to apply to everybody. So it doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter who's involved, you can do this.
All right, so scratch that. Find your Britney. You can find anybody.
Yeah. The other aspect, I think, of it is that we're doing this, and you've now chatted with a couple members of our co-op, and we hope there will be more to come because we have really cool co-op members, and they're awesome. But they aren't like, oh, you should do a podcast. We're talking about our co-op as a group and people in it, and people we've interacted with over the years, and they aren't all they didn't ask for us. They're not getting commission for this.
Yeah. And we don't want to call them out. We don't want to be like, well, Lisa here was,
Yeah. So it's especially with the children, they're going to grow up and be their own sovereign adults in life. And they didn't ask for us to do a podcast over the silly things they said in cake decorating class. Yeah. And so I think that's why we just going to offer them that modicum of protection. Hey, people can learn from us and what we're doing, but you didn't ask for us to plaster your name, address, and your dog's birthday on a podcast that's available to the public. So that's why we don't share it. You're still welcome to ask us. We get a few messages here and there like, hey, where's your pod? We want to get on your waiting list of your co-op. And
you'll never get on. I'm sorry. Because we have so many people.
The waiting list is really long, and it was long. It has nothing to do with the podcast. It's just the nature of the game right now in 2022 and homeschooling. So we would encourage you. You're more likely to have a successful community faster if you build it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But from the ground up, you were literally... Yeah.
But also because, the people who are in our co-op didn't ask for their
business to be thrown about.
Yeah. Publicly and with their names attached to it. So we keep that. We don't mention it. It's not like we're intentionally trying to hide. I'm sure you could find us if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
But we...
or you can listen to it and realize who we're talking about, right?
All good things. But yeah, that's why we don't. Awesome. If you have questions, comments, things you want to know, please reach out to us. If you want to tell us about conflicts you've had in your homeschool community and how you've resolved them, we hope you've resolved them. Or maybe you didn't. And you want to share those, we'd love to hear those too. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and at thevillagehomeschoolers@gmail.com. Have a wonderful rest of your day building your village and resolving conflict.
Bye.
Bye.